Hi guys, welcome back. If you haven't watched the previous video in this series, it's a long one. I suggest you do that before watching this video. The reason for this is because while the form is different and while we're moving into visual language, the deconstruction process and indeed the strategies that were outlined in the previous video are very similar to what we're going to be using in this video. Indeed, they can be used to analyze visual language as well. So when we're talking about visual language, we're talking about a whole range of things. Now, visual language refers to any visual stimulus on the page, okay? So that means photographs, logos, cartoons, comic strips, graphs and data charts, tables and spreadsheets, etc., etc. Now, it also means the visual layout of a particular text, which is something that often gets overlooked. Now, granted, it won't be the most important thing all the time, but there are instances of this being really important. Think of newspaper articles, big bold headlines, writing in columns, key quotes that are often repeated in larger italicized fonts. Now, there is a visual element to how this information is presented to you. Online blogs will have all manner of visual attributes. Advertisements, obviously. If you get an advertisement as a text to analyze, even if there aren't a lot of pictures, the placement of information is all in an attempt to direct focus, to emphasize. And these are deliberate decisions. And at the end of the day, what you're really analyzing is someone else's decision making. Why have they done this? So, because of the nature of visual language, we're not going to be able to analyze every example of visual language. However, I am going to cycle through some of the visuals that have been used in previous exams. They're straight from the source. They're the kinds of things that you will see in SACs and internal exams, and you all already have access to them. Now, the link to the previous VCAA exam papers are included in the video description below. So, like with written language, the one thing that you need to do before you analyze a piece of visual language is identify the argument that you will be attributing it to. Now, whether it's written or visual, it's all under the umbrella term of persuasive devices. So in an ideal world, or at least what my opinion is, which is not absolute, by the way, is that visual language should be treated like a persuasive device. Now, this means that it should be part of an analysis on an argument. It should not entail its own separate paragraph. Now, having said that, you can still do that. Certainly, there have been high-grade samples of this shown in the examination reports over the years, but if you integrate it into your analysis of an argument, my understanding is that it just means that there are more links. There's more room to connect to larger ideas in the text, and it means that you don't have to write an additional paragraph or several, depending on how many visual cues there are. Now, treating it like a written persuasive device, it's a time saver, which is so important under timed conditions. And it maintains that sense of cohesion in your essay because you're looking at the relationship between all of the things, not just all of the things except visual language, which is its own thing. Anyway, that's just my opinion. It's not gospel, but that is how I'm going to be handling it in this video. Also, just as a side note, exams have always been, and to my knowledge will always be, printed in black and white. That is until they inevitably go online. I'm just kidding. Who knows if that'll ever happen. But anyway, this eliminates the analysis of color from your analysis. Now, having said that, color is not to be confused with lighting. Even in a black and white image, lighting can be used in such a way that certain things are intended to be dark while others are intended to be bright. But that just depends on the image. Color, not so much. Lighting, yes, might still be applicable, but color, no. Either way, this is in reference to your traditional photographs, cartoons, etc. Obviously not text layout, graphs and charts, and all that other stuff. So, how do we analyze visual language? It's simple. You attribute it to an argument. Now, ideally, you'll have determined what the arguments of a text are, and in the same way that you organize and attribute each piece of persuasive written language to a particular argument, you do the exact same thing with visuals. With visuals, there are never a large amount of these. So, as a general rule, try to include all of them at some point in your analysis. If you don't include any of them, you're actually neglecting a core component of the task, so make sure that you get at least one, but ideally all. So the thought process or the questions that you need to be going through are: what information is being conveyed by the visual? What persuasive effect does the author generate? And how does this support the argument being made? Now, again, you don't necessarily have to do all of these things, and indeed, sometimes your answers to these will overlap and be the same, but generally, that's the kind of information that you want to be covering in your analysis. So let's look at some images and apply this pattern of thinking. In keeping with the last video, here are two images from the 2017 English exam. Yes, there are two. One is of a mountain of trash, the other is the school logo. The latter, from what I heard from students that year, was largely neglected. Haha, whoops. It's not a big deal, but certainly there was room for it in the analysis. So the first image, as you can see, is a pile of garbage bags. There are mountains of it, and it's against the backdrop of a cloudy sky. Now, even though there's no color, we can see that the clouds are pretty dark. They're not happy clouds, they are angry clouds. And anyway, if you've read the text or watched the last video, you know that the text is about pollution and littering around the school of Spire Primary. And the principal is warning parents that if immediate action is not taken on their littering, then the consequences for the future will be dire. So that's one of the arguments in this piece. The school and the entire community, including parents, need to adopt eco-friendly practices if they are to prevent and even undo some of the irreversible destruction that will otherwise take place and jeopardize the future. So with that argument in mind, that's something that I can attribute this visual to. Now remember, the questions that I need to be considering when I've got my visuals are, what information is being conveyed by the visual? What persuasive effect does the author generate? And how does this support the argument being made? So if you've read through the examination report, then you might have already seen some high-grade samples on this. If not, I suggest that you do go and take a look. I'm not going to use those examples though. They're there if you want them, but take a look at this example. Now keep in mind, this is not a sample of a whole paragraph. This is simply part of the analytical portion of a paragraph which addresses the visual, okay? So the sample reads, through her use of the visual, Walker enhances the urgency of her proposal by prophesying the consequences that will occur if action is not taken. The mountainous hills conveyed against the apocalyptic backdrop of dark and clogging clouds merely emphasize her view that the environmental damage will be irreversible unless her policy is adopted by the entire schooling community. As such, Walker not only generates a sense of fear and apprehension toward the impending destruction that will be wrought by unchecked pollution and littering, but so too does she thus create the impression that her policy is noble, necessary, and cognizant of their shared responsibility for the future of our world. So there you go. There is even some persuasive written language included in this sample. But the main thing is that I didn't spend a lot of time describing the visual. Yeah, the description of the visual is only half a sentence, which I've highlighted in yellow. But what I focused on were those questions. What does it convey, which is highlighted in green? What persuasive effect does the author generate, which is in blue? And how does it support the argument, which is in orange? Now, I didn't necessarily go through those things one by one. Green and orange, for example, they alternate, but holistically, that's the approach that I tried to take. That's the information that I intended to discuss. And that's what you need to do. Now take a look at the second visual, the school logo. Now again, this would be analyzed most effectively when the connection is articulated between the visual and the argument. So here's another sample. Several times, Walker makes the point that we at Spire can do more, and that we are responsible for the future of our world. The inclusion of the school logo is merely emblematic of this responsibility. The tree thus becomes a symbol of both the environment as well as the blooming new paths that Walker is constantly working toward. Additionally, the emboldened name of the school, Spire, in the motto Lead and Inspire, capitalizes the green reputation that the school already has, and indeed solidifies Walker's claim that the school's responsibility is to operate in accordance with this noble and leading philosophy. So again, the description is in yellow. It's very small, very little time spent on it because that's not the focus. The focus is on what does it convey, which is in green, what persuasive effect does the author generate, which is in blue, and how does it support the argument, which is in orange. Now, with this example, if you're reading it carefully, or even if you're confused, it's likely because the colors should actually be overlapping here. The green and the blue in this case could be either green or blue because those lines are discussing the author and the meaning that is being conveyed. So similarly, at the end, the link to the argument in orange could actually also be in blue because it's also discussing the effect being generated by the author. So you'll find that after practicing, or even before practicing, it doesn't necessarily have to be that you're doing one thing, then another thing, then another thing. Again, it's about that holistic quality, the cohesion of your analysis. You don't have to answer those questions one by one. Just make sure that that's generally the information that you're targeting. What is the visual conveying? What persuasive effect is it generating? And how is it supporting the author's argument? What's it mean? What's its effect? And what's the argument it's supporting? Okay, meaning, effect, argument. Cool. We're just going to jet through some other examples of visuals now. All of these are from past exams, which you can find using the link. But we're not going to use all of the visuals because I want to touch on the different types of visuals. So I'm not going to give you context this time. I'm just going to show you a visual, show you a piece of analysis, and then I want you to see whether or not, regardless of whether or not you've read the actual text, try and see if you can see those three things being addressed. Yeah, the meaning, the effect, and the argument. Now, I won't be highlighting them this time. I want you to try and do that yourself, okay? All of these sample paragraphs, by the way, you can find also in the video description below. Okay, so here's a visual from the 2019 exam. Take a look at it for a minute, for a second, pause the video if you need to. Now here's the analysis. To evidence Astaire's claim that Haley's local store is not your average grocery store and that it puts customers first, the visual depicts the amiable interaction between an employee and a customer. Being positioned beneath the headline, it is among the first things that customers perceive in the advertorial, and as such, it serves as a visual preface to Astaire's argument that the shift to cashless transactions in store is in service of the customer's needs. By characterizing this shift to be customer-centric, Astaire thus portrays the store to be one that is a rightful leader in our community, as it works to service the needs of their customers. Again, see if you can identify those qualities and those components. I'm not trying to trick you or anything. They're all there, but you need to start trying to find them yourself. And then when you're ready, start applying those components and those qualities to your own writing as well. Now we're going to take a look at a different visual now. This is the 2016 exam. Here's the visual. It's a cartoon. It's an artist's impression. And it's a big one. There's quite a lot in it, but here's the analysis. Gary Shaw's impression of Wiley's proposed landmark further enhances the benefits it would have on the Lawton economy. Not only does the immense watermelon structure become emblematic of the quality and freshness of Lawton's luscious produce, but it is a site populated by tourists, and it is a site to which cars are portrayed to be traveling, evoking Wiley's claim that such a structure would attract travelers, promote their region, and ultimately bolster their economy so that Lawton gets a share of that prosperity. Additionally, the shining sun suggests that such a concept will play a significant role in the bright future of Lawton, and therefore encourages the residents of Lawton to support the construction of the proposed landmark. So also in that one, notice how I amended quotes. If you're not sure how to do that, you basically just replace or amend a word in the quote, and then when you do that, you just indicate which word or words have been amended or changed by putting the square brackets around them. You generally only do this when you need to adapt a quote to give more appropriate context to that quote, or if you want it to fit in with the flow of your sentence. Okay, cool tip. Okay, here is another sample from the 2014 exam, and this one's a diagram. The included diagram is merely representative of the many benefits that Uragon attributes to space exploration. By identifying many of the world's most widespread technological advancements, such as solar panels, GPS tracking, and medical imaging, Uragon highlights how the exploration of space is essential to advancing technology across all walks of life, most notably the energy and health sectors. By implicating the next generation of scientists, Uragon ultimately communicates that if science and technology are to continue advancing and benefiting the human race, then so too must space exploration be appropriately funded. So that's another one. Again, see if you can look for those components and qualities. The next one we're going to look at is from the 2013 exam, and it's a chart. The Grow Slow Garden Group's concern for the environmental impact is highlighted most directly by the included chart. By quantifying the millions of dollars that would be lost via food wastage and juxtaposing this with the price that planet Earth would consequently pay for the convenience of inorganic food, The implication is made clear that a refusal to establish a community garden would also mean perpetuating wasteful and environmentally destructive practices. While the financial cost is excessive in its own right, what the Grosslow Garden Group conveys to be more disturbing is the hidden price tag of wastage and environmental degradation. So there you go. I'm going to stop it there. We've now looked at samples for images, logos, photographs, cartoons, diagrams, and charts. Now, is this every type of visual? Of course not, but that gives you a pretty good spread. And again, they're all from the last 7 years of exams. So hopefully you took some time to really look at each of those analyses and identify what it was doing. Certainly, I hope you kind of paused the video between each piece to have a look at that. If you haven't, I'd recommend that you go back and do that. But yeah, hopefully you can start to see the same questions and how they're applying to all visuals, regardless of what that visual actually is. You know, what we're thinking about is the meaning, the effect, and the argument that it's supporting. Audience isn't mentioned in that list specifically, but you'll have noticed that audience is a part of all of those things anyway, as is the author. Now remember, the task always boils down to that relationship between author and audience. How has the author tried to persuade the audience through argument, through written language, and now through visual language? That's what your focus is. Okay, and that brings me to the end of this video. Thank you for watching. I hope you got something beneficial out of that. And when you're ready, I will see you in the next video on essay structure. Peace.